Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be talking about just a few takeaways or a few just reflections on the discussion or module 2 discussion board. So here we go. Overall, I really appreciated the reflections of everyone on your blind spots or triggers or just kind of those reactions that you might be having when working with clients, especially family clients. I think in particular, like I almost notice like it's more than just this duality, but sometimes it's like, okay, I don't have experience working with certain types of families, so that might be difficult for me. Maybe not necessarily a trigger, but I might have blind spots. But then a lot of the triggers came from, okay, what if I over-identify or I have too close of an experience in something that's still, striking me on a personal level that I'm working through. How do I navigate that in the moment? I think that's just a matter of time. If you haven't experienced that yet, it's going to surface. And sometimes we just don't even know yet. We don't even know what those you know, what those trigger points or what those, reactionary points are going to be until we're in the middle of it. But I think it just speaks to the deep inward journey that we all need to be engaging in. And it's not like we're bad if we have those reactions. I think what is important is that we respond to them. We don't try to bury them. We don't try to avoid them. We make space for them, and we seek out consultation and supervision, and have this inwards self-examination process. That like I said, it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when we're going to have these reactions. So just an acceptance that they're going to happen, I think, is the first step to really being able to like, okay, now I need to just embrace this process. That something's obviously striking me that I need to work through. Uh, Let's see. I just wanted to say like, so I guess step one is just, so we notice these reactions, we have these ideas of what these, reaction points or trigger points are going to be, but then what do we do with them? I didn't necessarily explicitly require that in the discussion board, but I hope you're all thinking about that. Just really quick, this was actually an individual client, but I was doing some career counseling with the client who's from an upper class uh, socioeconomic class, and I had to silence my phone real quick. And I just kind of noticed that I was annoyed with this client. I was feeling like he was just kind of living in this cloud and kind of unaware of reality. But then I had to really just be thoughtful of like, oh, I'm obviously having my own personalization reactions. Maybe some of them are somewhat accurate, but the annoyance needed to be worked through. So I took that to supervision. That was one of my first things that I brought up. Okay, I have this reaction. I need to make sense of it. So supervision was really helpful to not try to bury that or feel like guilty for having that reaction. It led me to like have this self-examination of like, I think it was just my family culture. Like I came from much more of like a Blue Cross type, or not Blue Cross, thinking of health insurance apparently, blue collar type family, and not kind of being that low middle class for a decent portion of my life and my family of origin. And so I kind of had this, I think I learned from some side of my family, like some family of origin messages, is like this kind of this negative view of those from an upper class. So I had to like work through that, and I'm like, okay, so this is somewhat of a cultural process as well. My family of my culture, my subculture. And then I had to obviously be aware of the ethical, ramifications of those reactions, that I can't impose my values. I can't impose my beliefs and my attitudes. That's A4B of the ACA Code of Ethics about, values and not imposing values. So it's not like I had to remain blind to, issues of socioeconomic status and kind of this the blind spots that the client might be having from being in like an upper class setting. I didn't have to like not address that at all. It did come up at times, but it was like, okay, how could this be helpful to the client though? Like sometimes maybe I need to push, a blind spot conversation just to like kind of help explore. And it's not like I had to push it and force it, but it's like almost, I guess a better word is to invite into that space of reflection of the blind spot. So anyways, I just was thinking about, our triggers and our reactions, and at least I'm not saying I did it the right way, but I think some of those steps were helpful in allowing me to then like continuing with that client, I was able to be more present and more accepting and holding that unconditional positive regard because I'd worked through some of my reactions that I wasn't really aware of. I guess that then leads to a few thoughts on just continuing to wrestle with the how of cultural competence. So the third prompt for this week was, addressing how you can move towards greater cultural competence, and that is absolutely a process. It's not like I've arrived at cultural competence. It's an ever evolving and ever, uh, continuing process. So I just wanted to remind that every single client experience is going to be a cultural experience. Even if someone on paper looks the exact same as you, with their demographic information, they're going to react to their cultural experiences different. They're going to have their own reactions. They're going to have subcultural uniquenesses that you need to be aware of. So I just wanted to highlight that every client experience is going to be a cultural experience, because we all are enmeshed and embedded in culture. So we all have to, and particularly like the subcultures as well, as like what is our individual experience of culture. And because I appreciated that a lot of you talked about how, like, I need to educate myself on some potential general patterns among different demographics of clients, which is really helpful. But then we can't assume that general information is going to be applicable to our unique clients. Maybe their unique experience of their culture is very different than, the broad themes or how many people in their culture react. So just some important things to be aware of. So uh, I appreciate that a lot of you talked about broaching, but I wanted to throw that out here as well. Like, the how of cultural competences, we need to learn the skill of broaching. How do we address culture? How do we make that kind of an essential part of the counseling experience if needed? And how it's needed. Like I said, all of it's going to be a cultural experience, but sometimes we need to broach things in a bit more clear of a manner than at other times. Uh, I was just thinking of, this is actually an interesting scenario that I had with a client. So I was working in career counseling once again, but it was almost like an individual career counseling that then kind of morphed into some family career counseling work. So I was working with a client that identified as Latina and a female, and she was experiencing quite a bit of like microaggressions from her mother-in-law. So her mother-in-law was white and was basically just kind of saying these kind of subtle messages and sometimes not super subtle messages about, Latinas and what they're capable from like a career perspective. And the client just felt like really minimized and kind of boxed into a certain type of perception of herself from her mother-in-law, and it's kind of like leading her to go through this process, like, okay, so this internalized microaggression a little bit, or just trying to wrestle with that microaggression of like, what am I capable of? How do people see me? How does that influence me and impact me? So at one session, it was important for me just to say, it sounds like you're just really wrestling with this microaggression, with from your mother-in-law. And then we kind of talked about microaggression and how she was maybe experiencing it. She's like, yeah, you get it. Like, and I'm not saying that I was like perfectly understanding or anything, but it was helpful enough for me to use the language of microaggression and use the language of kind of just addressing cultural and this cultural friction exchange between her and her mother-in-law, to where she was able to process her views of herself and the messages that she's receiving externally about herself. And if I wouldn't have broached that, it probably wouldn't have happened. And I think that's pretty common in counselors. And, many clients might not broach, kind of sensitive cultural topics unless the counselor at least invites them to look at that door and say, hey, I see this cultural door that we can address if you want to, but then the client chooses to open it or not. So then this also turned into, like I said, a family career counseling type exchange, because the husband ended up joining a session because they're, kind of navigating as a couple how to, you know, move forward as a family with different career goals. And if my client, the female client, was going to change career directions, I was going to kind of impact and alter the family process or the homeostasis of the family. So that was important to address as well. Uh, so anyways, just a few thoughts on broaching, and I think we all need to continue to wrestle with that how. And as you all mentioned, or many of you mentioned, that I think the how of cultural competence is often like this inner look. We need to look at the mirror at ourselves as what's our cultural heritage and, our, and traditions and beliefs and social identities. I think that's if we can't see culture within ourselves, it's going to be hard to see it at a significant deeper level with clients. And I say that because I think culture is more than just social identities. I think we often talk about, okay, race, gender, sexual orientation, religious status, et cetera, or disability status, et cetera. Uh, that those identities absolutely are part of culture and impact culture, but culture can be a deeper layer than that too, of just like the systems that we're a part of that influence the traditions, our deep rooted values and beliefs about the world and about, people in general, about ourselves. uh, so once again, it's, yes, look at these demographic and like social identity constructs, because they're almost like whisperings into important aspects of culture, but they're there's this deeper level of like, okay, so what have these social identities spoken to the traditions and norms and beliefs about the world that we hold? So uh, maybe that's getting a little too abstract, but I think it's important to like that. I guess the reason why I'm bringing that up is because we all are shaped by that level of culture, even if we don't know it and don't think about it. Uh, and I guess I'm kind of speaking to more majority culture folks, that I think sometimes it's easier to just say, oh, like I don't really have a culture, I don't think about culture, but you can't not have culture. It's kind of part of the framework of the world. And, that's my belief system. So we have to attune to that. And as we attune to that, then we're better able to more deeply attune to clients, is the key reason why, it's important to address. So just a few thoughts, a few things to consider, and a few reflections from this discussion board. But everyone, please stay in touch if you have questions or comments. Some of the bigger assignments are coming up. So uh, yeah, well, I'll probably share. I'll plan on creating another video about the next written assignment that's coming up, the paper assignment. So expect that coming out soon too. Thanks.